Hiding her Kenyan father could cost her visa, her restaurant, and her freedom, but turning him in might get him killed. The kitchen exhaled steam and memory, pale gold light filtering through fogged windows, catching suspended particles of berber and gochugaru that swirled like rust-colored snow. Naria Ching Kim moved through the cramped pop-up space like a dancer who'd memorized every step, her hands blackened with spice that had worked its way under her fingernails and into the whorls of her fingerprints. She stirred ugali in one pot while kimchi jjigae bubbled in another, the wooden spoon creating figure eights that never broke rhythm, her chef bandana slipping down curls that refused to stay tamed, no matter how many bobby pins she sacrificed. The scents collided in a way that made sense only to her. Fermented cabbage meeting Berber heat, sesame oil cutting through the earthiness of maize flour. Outside, customers pressed their faces against glass, fogged by heat and curiosity, their breath leaving constellation patterns that dissolved and reformed with each exhalation. "This one's called Nairobi Morning," Nari said, sliding a plate across the stainless steel counter to a young Korean couple whose linked hands spoke of early dating nervousness. The woman's fingers trembled slightly as she picked up her fork, silver catching the overhead pendant lights, casting coin-sized reflections across the subway tile. "Mandasi with gochujang honey butter." The woman took a bite. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating in the universal language of unexpected pleasure, the fork pausing halfway back to the plate as her brain processed flavors it had no reference for. I don't know what this is," she said, her voice carrying equal parts confusion and wonder. "That's the point," Nari replied, smiling despite the exhaustion pulling at her shoulders, like hands trying to drag her underwater. Her back muscles screamed from 12 hours of standing, her feet ached in sneakers that had absorbed too many spills, but her smile held. Practiced, professional, masking the fear that this would all evaporate, like the steam rising from her pots. She could hear the whispers starting, the polite confusion rippling through the small crowd, shoulders angling toward each other in that particular geometry of gossip. Eyebrows raised in question marks. Uncertainty about whether this fusion was innovation or confusion. Whether she was a chef or a curiosity. But here, in this 12-square-meter kitchen that smelled like her mother's Nairobi childhood and her own Seoul adolescence, Nari felt whole for the first time in years. Her hands steady, her purpose clear, the hyphen in her identity finally a bridge instead of a chasm. The last customer left at 11. Nari locked the door with hands that shook from adrenaline come-down, pressed her forehead against the cool metal, the temperature shock grounding her, pulling her back into her body. She let herself breathe. Deep inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, the way her mother had taught her during panic attacks in middle school. The pop-up had sold out for the third night running. Her loan officer had finally stopped returning her calls with skepticism. A permanent location was close, so close she could taste it like coriander on her tongue, bright and citrusy, and almost within reach. She didn't know that would be the last peaceful night. The municipal office smelled like bleach and bureaucracy, harsh ammonia cutting through stale coffee and the particular sourness of human anxiety absorbed by carpet over decades. Nari sat across from a civil servant whose nameplate read Kim Sang-woo in both Hangul and English, his face revealing nothing, the fluorescent overhead lights turning his skin the color of old paper. He flipped through her application with the care of someone examining produce at market, fingers lingering on corners, eyes scanning for the bruise that would let him reject the whole batch. Each page turn was deliberate, accompanied by small non-committal sounds in the back of his throat that could mean anything or nothing. "Your concept is unusual," he said finally, setting down the papers with a precision that suggested they'd already failed some invisible test. "It's unique," Nari corrected, keeping her voice steady even as her pulse hammered in her throat. She could feel it, the throb of blood against skin, wondered if he could see it. Her hands lay flat on her thighs beneath the desk where he couldn't see them clench. "Your visa status." He tapped a line in her documents with a pen that made small clicking sounds each time the tip retracted. F27. Residence based on Korean heritage but born abroad. Father Kenyan, correct? "Yes." The word came out clipped, defensive. She heard it and tried to soften her expression, but her jaw had already tightened. And the father's current status? Not relevant to my business license, Nari said, each word carefully measured, trying to project confidence while her stomach twisted itself into knots. Sangwoo looked up. The fluorescent lights made his face a mask of shadows and harsh angles. Deep hollows under his eyes, the bones of his skull too prominent. Everything is relevant, Miss Kim. Seoul has standards. Permanent establishment requires stability. Clean background. No complications. The word complications hung between them like a knife suspended by fishing line. Invisible support, visible threat. Nari felt her shoulders draw inward, her body making itself smaller in the universal language of prey, trying to avoid a predator's notice. One mistake, he continued, sliding her application back across the desk with 2 fingers. The papers moving slowly, deliberately, the sound of paper on laminate unnaturally loud in the small office. And this all goes away. You understand? Outside, Nari stood on the sidewalk and watched her reflection fragment in a shop window. Her face broken into geometric sections by the window's decorative etching, each piece slightly misaligned with the others. The dream that had felt solid minutes ago now seemed built on paper-thin ice, the kind that cracked under weight and swallowed people whole. She'd spent 29 years trying to prove she belonged somewhere, anywhere. Korea had seemed like the answer, her mother's final gift, delivered with last breaths that had smelled like hospital disinfectant and kimchi she'd begged Nari to sneak in. They said one mistake could erase everything. The apartment was quiet when Nari returned. Just the hum of the refrigerator's compressor cycling on and the distant sound of traffic 12 floors below, punctuated by occasional horn blasts and the hydraulic sigh of bus brakes. She kicked off her sneakers, still stained with turmeric from the morning prep, the yellow having permanently claimed the canvas no matter how many times she'd scrubbed. She was reaching for her phone, screen lighting up with notifications she was too tired to process when someone knocked. Not the doorbell. A knock. 3 sharp raps that felt urgent and wrong, the rhythm too aggressive, too demanding. The sound echoed in her chest cavity. Nari checked the peephole, the fisheye lens distorting everything, making the hallway curve like she was looking through the wrong end of a telescope. A man stood there older, wearing a worn leather jacket that had seen better decades, the collar frayed and one sleeve showing a patch repair. His face was shadowed by the hallway's inadequate lighting, but something about the slope of his shoulders made her chest tighten with recognition she didn't want to name. Muscle memory from childhood, the particular way he'd always stood with weight on his left leg to favor an old football injury. She opened the door. The hallway air rushed in, cooler than her apartment, carrying the smell of someone else's dinner and industrial floor cleaner. Nari Bear, the man said, using the nickname no one had called her since she was 7 years old. His voice cracked on the second syllable, emotion making it rough. The hallway tilted. Nari gripped the door frame, her knuckles going white as bone, pressing hard enough that the wood grain imprinted itself into her palm. She'd spent 22 years imagining this moment, rehearsing the cold dismissal in bathroom mirrors, practicing the door slammed in his face until the motion felt righteous and clean, savoring the satisfaction of rejection returned with interest. But her mouth wouldn't form words. Her tongue felt thick and useless, all the prepared speeches evaporating like morning dew under direct sun. Joseph Kip Odiambo looked older than she remembered. The last photograph she'd burned had shown him at 34, hair still mostly black, face unlined. Now his coily hair was shot through with gray that caught the hallway light like silver wire, his eyes carrying the kind of exhaustion that came from running, from sleeping in places that weren't home, from looking over your shoulder until your neck developed a permanent crick. A jagged scar crossed his left cheek, new since the last photograph, the tissue raised and shiny, the kind that came from something sharp and deliberate. "I know," he said quietly, his hands hanging at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them, like he'd forgotten the choreography of normal human interaction. "I know I have no right." Behind him the elevator dinged, the sound sharp in the carpeted silence. An elderly neighbor emerged, glanced at them with the carefully neutral expression of someone who'd learned not to involve themselves in hallway dramas, kept walking. Her slippers made soft shuffling sounds against the floor. The moment stretched, fragile as spider silk caught on morning branches. One wrong movement, and it would tear completely. Nari, I need help. I have nowhere else. Don't. Her voice came out hoarse, scraped raw from somewhere deep in her throat. Don't you dare. But she stepped aside. Not from forgiveness. Her body was still rigid, every muscle tensed for fight or flight. Not from love. That feeling was buried under too many years of abandonment to excavate in a single moment. From something older and more stubborn than either. The part of her that had inherited his cheekbones and her mother's rage. The part that couldn't turn away from blood even when blood had turned away first. Duty, maybe, or the particular brand of self-destruction that ran in families. The man who abandoned me was standing in my doorway. Kip stood in the center of Nari's apartment like a man who'd forgotten how to occupy space without apologizing for it. His shoulders hunched, making himself smaller, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets where they created awkward bulges. His boots left dirt on her clean floor. Red-brown soil that could have been Kenyan earth or just the accumulated grime of running. She didn't offer him tea, didn't offer him a seat. Just crossed her arms and waited, her body language screaming everything her mouth wouldn't say. The silence stretched between them like taffy pulled to the breaking point. There are people looking for me, Kip said finally. The words coming out rushed like he'd been rehearsing them. Dangerous people. Then go to the police. Her voice was flat, emotionless. The tone of someone who'd already decided this wasn't her problem. The police are why I'm here. Nari laughed, but it came out sharp enough to cut. A sound with edges. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what this is? She gestured at him with one hand, the motion violent and dismissive, encompassing him from head to toe. You need something. Again. That's the only time I exist to you. Kip's jaw tightened. She watched the muscle jump beneath the skin, his teeth grinding together. In the apartment's warm light from the floor lamp in the corner, she could see how much he'd aged. The lines carved deep around his eyes, parentheses framing a life she knew nothing about. The way his hands trembled slightly before he shoved them deeper in his pockets, trying to hide the weakness. I have documents, he said quietly, each word chosen with care. Evidence against officials in Nairobi. Corruption, election rigging. Worse. They know I have them. They've already killed 2 journalists who were helping me. So destroy the documents. Simple, clean, not her problem. And let them win? I don't care about your politics. The words exploded out of her like they'd been building pressure for years, her voice rising to a shout, hands uncrossing so she could gesture wildly. I don't care about your causes or your convictions or whatever noble reason you had for disappearing when I was 7. You chose Kenya over us, over Mom, over me. Your mother chose Seoul, Kip said, and his voice finally broke, cracking down the middle like dropped china. I didn't leave you, Nari Bear. She took you somewhere I couldn't follow. My visa was denied 3 times. 3 times I filled out forms and paid fees we couldn't afford and sat in embassy waiting rooms for 8 hours only to be told no. I tried. Don't. Nari turned away, staring at her own reflection in the dark window, the city lights behind her creating a halo effect, obscuring her features. Don't rewrite history to make yourself the victim. Silence filled the room like water rising, slow, inexorable, drowning them both. Outside, Seoul blinked and hummed, 12 floors of indifference separating them from a city that didn't care about small tragedies. Kip sank onto the edge of her couch without permission, suddenly looking decades older than 56, his spine curving, head dropping forward, the weight of exhaustion finally winning. 3 days, Nari heard herself say, the words surprising her even as they left her mouth. You can stay 3 days, then you figure something else out. Thank you. His voice was barely a whisper. Don't thank me. You taught me about duty, remember? All those stories about Luo traditions, about taking care of family. She finally looked at him, her reflection in the window ghosting over his real form. Congratulations. The lesson stuck. She gave him a blanket, pulled it from the hall closet and threw it rather than handed it, the fabric unfolding midair, pointed to the couch without meeting his eyes. He thanked her again, quieter this time, but she was already walking to her bedroom, her sock feet making no sound on the laminate floor, closing the door on his gratitude and her own conflicted heart. The lock clicked with a finality that satisfied something petty in her chest. I told myself it was only for one night. Morning came with the smell of coffee Nari didn't remember making, the rich, slightly bitter aroma of dark roast pulling her from the shallow sleep she'd managed. Kip was in her kitchen, moving with the careful politeness of a guest who knew he was unwelcome. Every motion minimal, controlled, trying not to take up space. He'd found her French press somehow, located the good beans she kept in the freezer, figured out the precise water temperature she preferred. The domesticity of it made her want to scream. This man who'd been absent for 22 years now brewing coffee in her kitchen, like it was normal, like he belonged there. I need to go to the restaurant, she said, not meeting his eyes, addressing her words to the space slightly to his left. Inventory delivery. Don't answer the door. Don't go near the windows. Don't. I know how to hide, Nari. His voice carried the weight of experience. The words landed heavy. Of course he did. Hiding was probably the only thing he was good at. Surviving, running, disappearing. The skills of someone who'd made a life of avoiding consequences. The morning prep at the pop-up space usually calmed her. The ritual of washing vegetables, portioning spices, the meditation of knife work. But today her hands felt clumsy, disconnected from her brain. She dropped a knife, the blade clattering against the cutting board, the sound making her flinch. Burned garlic, the acrid smell filling the small space, making her eyes water. Her phone buzzed against the steel counter. A message from Han Soo-jin, her only real friend in Seoul, and the food blogger who'd first written about her pop-up. Soo-jin had texted, "Can't make lunch. Sorry. Work thing. Third cancellation this week." Nari stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in her stomach. Not quite dread, not quite suspicion, but something in between, a prickling awareness that something was wrong, the way animals sensed earthquakes before the ground started shaking. She looked up. Through the window, past the handwritten menu taped to the glass, a black sedan was parked across the street. Same one that had been there yesterday, occupying the same illegal spot. The driver visible as a silhouette behind tinted windows. A man sat in the driver's seat, not looking at his phone, not reading a newspaper, just waiting. The stillness was wrong. People in parked cars moved. They shifted, adjusted mirrors, checked phones. This man was statue still. Nari's pulse kicked up. She could feel it in her wrists, her neck, behind her eyes. She stepped back from the window, her body moving on instinct before her brain fully processed the threat. Her phone rang. Unknown number. The generic ringtone suddenly seemed too loud in the quiet kitchen. She let it go to voicemail, watched the notification appear and disappear. No message was left. It rang again 5 minutes later. Same number, the digits burned into her vision. This time she answered, pressing the phone to her ear with a hand that trembled slightly. Silence on the other end, just the faint sound of breathing, of an open line, then a click, dead air. She called Kip. He answered on the first ring, his voice tense with the readiness of someone who'd been expecting bad news, who'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop since the moment he'd knocked on her door. "There's a car outside my restaurant," Nari said, keeping her voice low even though she was alone, "and someone just called and hung up." "Don't go home," Kip said immediately. "No hesitation, no questions. Go somewhere public, somewhere with cameras. This is paranoid." "Nari, listen to me." His urgency cut through her denial like a blade through butter. "These people don't send warnings. They don't negotiate. Once they start hunting, they don't stop until they find what they're looking for." She hung up, stabbed at the screen harder than necessary, walked to the window again, drawn by morbid curiosity or stupidity or the need to confirm she wasn't imagining threats. The sedan was still there, idling, a thin stream of exhaust visible in the cold morning air. As she watched, a second car pulled up behind it, this one with diplomatic plates, the numbers and letters visible even from across the street. That's when I realized we were already being watched. The immigration raid came at 9:30 p.m. Nari was closing up, had just locked the front door when she saw them through the glass. Two officers in Navy uniforms, badges catching the streetlight, flanked by a man in a tailored coat who moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew doors would open for him. His posture was perfect, shoulders back, chin level, every inch of him radiating authority and the comfortable certainty of power. Nari's first thought was, Kip. The name flashed through her mind in neon letters. Her second was, run. Every muscle in her body tensed for flight, adrenaline flooding her system, her vision tunneling. But running would confirm guilt, make her look like exactly what they suspected. So she opened the door, her hands steady on the handle, even though her heart was trying to punch through her ribcage. Kim Nari? The man in the coat spoke first, his Korean crisp and formal, textbook perfect with a Seoul accent that marked him as native. I'm Park Min-jae, Immigration Services. We've received a report of visa irregularities and potential unauthorized residents at this location. This is a restaurant, Nari said, forcing her voice steady, pitching it lower than natural to hide the tremor. Not a residence. Nevertheless, Park Min-jae's smile was polite as a knife blade. Technically friendly, actually threatening. We'll need to conduct an inspection. Standard procedure. They moved through the space like they knew exactly what they were looking for. One officer checking the storage room, opening boxes, photographing inventory, another examining every corner with a flashlight, the beam catching dust motes and making shadows jump. Park Min-jae himself examined her business license with the slow care of someone reading poetry, his eyes tracking each line, his expression revealing nothing. Nari's phone buzzed in her pocket, the vibration making her jump, her hand reflexively covering her pocket as if to muffle the sound. A text from Kip. They came to the apartment. I'm in the crawl space. Don't come back. Her blood went cold, temperature dropping so fast she felt lightheaded. The crawl space, the narrow space behind the water heater where someone could hide if they were desperate, if they were hunted, if they were her father. Miss Kim, Park Min-jae was watching her, his eyes sharp, cataloging every micro-expression. Is something wrong? No, just a supplier. The lie felt clumsy in her mouth. Too big, obvious. Ah, business troubles? He set down her license with careful precision, centering it on the counter. I understand you're applying for permanent establishment. That requires a very clean record, very stable circumstances. The implication hung between them like smoke. Visible, choking, impossible to ignore. I have nothing to hide, Nari said, lifting her chin, trying to project confidence while her intestines twisted themselves into sailor's knots. Good. Then you won't mind if we verify a few things. Your father, Joseph Odiambo. When did you last see him? The question was a trap with teeth. Every answer was wrong. Tell the truth and admit he was here. Lie and commit fraud. Nari felt the walls closing in, the small kitchen suddenly airless. Years ago, Nari said, each word carefully placed. We're not in contact. Park Min-jae pulled out his phone, swiped through screens with one thumb, showed her a photo. The screen brightness harsh in the dim kitchen. It had been taken yesterday, the timestamp visible in the corner. Kip entering her apartment building, face partially visible in the security camera's grainy feed, recognizable enough to matter. This was sent to us anonymously this morning, he said, his voice conversational, pleasant. Strange, isn't it, that your estranged father would appear in Seoul at the exact moment his name appears on several international watch lists. Nari's mouth was desert dry. She swallowed and tasted copper, bit the inside of her cheek without meaning to. Behind Park Min-jae, the officers had stopped their searching. They were watching her now, waiting to see what she'd do with the lie already visible on her face, reading her body language like an open book. I don't know anything about that, she said, the words hollow even to her own ears. Park Min-jae nodded slowly, like a teacher acknowledging a student's predictable wrong answer. Of course, but just to be thorough, we'll need to search your residence as well. Tonight, if possible. You need a warrant. We have probable cause. His smile never wavered. Painted on. Permanent. Unless you'd prefer to invite us voluntarily? Cooperative behavior looks very good in visa reviews. Nari's mind raced, calculations spinning too fast to complete. If they searched her apartment, they'd find Kip. If she refused, they'd search anyway and she'd look guilty. There was no right answer, no safe exit, no door labeled escape. My apartment is private, she said, straightening her spine, pulling back her shoulders. Come back with a warrant. Park Min-jae's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A predator recognizing prey that might fight back, the calculation adjusting from easy capture to requiring effort. Very well, we'll be in touch. He handed her his card, heavy cardstock, embossed letters, the kind that announced importance. Soon, they left. Nari locked the door behind them with shaking hands. Had to try twice to get the key in the lock, then immediately called Kip, pressing the phone so hard against her ear it hurt. They know, she said, the words tumbling out. They have photos. They're coming for you. Then I need to leave. No! The word surprised her with its force. If you run now, they'll deport me for harboring you. We need time. We need a plan. But time was the one thing they didn't have. It was slipping through their fingers like water, like sand, like every other cliché about loss that turned out to be literally true. The moment I lied, there was no going back. The email arrived at 6 a.m., clinical and devastating in its bureaucratic precision. The subject line alone enough to make Nari's stomach drop. F-27 visa status, official review notice. She read it 3 times before the words stopped blurring, her tired eyes struggling to focus on the screen. Your F-27 visa status has been flagged for comprehensive review. All pending business applications are suspended, pending investigation completion. Expected timeline, 60-90 days, 60 to 90 days. 3 months of her life in limbo while they dug through every document, every connection, every reason she might not belong in the country her mother had died trying to give her. The cursor blinked. Accusatory. Final. Kip found her on the apartment floor, laptop open in her lap, bathing her face in cold blue light, staring at nothing or staring at everything, at the future she'd been building, dissolving like sugar in rain. What happened? His voice was rough with sleep, or fear, or guilt. She showed him the screen without speaking, just turned the laptop so he could read. Watched his face collapse in on itself. Not surprise, just the confirmation of guilt he'd been carrying since he knocked on her door. His hand came up to cover his mouth, pressing hard like he could push the apology back inside. I'm sorry. His voice came out broken, fractured down the middle. God, Nari, I'm so sorry. I've ruined your life again. Again. The word tasted like acid on her tongue. Burning, bitter. You can't ruin something twice. You just keep destroying new parts of it. She stood, her joints cracking from sitting too long in one position on the hard floor. Paced to the window, her reflection ghost pale in the dawn light. The black sedan was gone, replaced by a gray one. Different car, same purpose. They weren't even hiding anymore. The surveillance was a message, a reminder that she was seen, cataloged, judged. The restaurant is finished, Nari continued, her voice flat, affect completely absent. Shock, maybe, or the exhaustion that came after sustained fear. No one will invest in someone under immigration review. No landlord will lease to me. The pop-up license expires in 2 weeks. I have nothing. The documents, Kip said suddenly, sitting up straighter, animation returning to his features. If I release them, if I give the international press what they want, maybe that gives me enough leverage to negotiate protection. Then you're not harboring a fugitive anymore. You're protecting a whistleblower, Nari laughed, sharp and humorless, a sound with no joy in it. You think Korea cares about the difference? You think Park Min-jae is going to apologize and give me my life back because you're suddenly a hero instead of a criminal? Kip didn't answer, because they both knew the truth, the ugly reality that neither wanted to say out loud. Bureaucracy didn't forgive. The flag on her record wouldn't disappear just because the narrative changed. Guilt or innocence didn't matter. Association was enough. Proximity was guilt. 3 more days, Nari said quietly, her breath fogging the window glass, obscuring her view of Seoul. That's what I promised you. After that, you figure out your own salvation. She grabbed her bag, the motion violent, yanking the strap hard enough that she heard stitching pop. Left. Behind her, Kip stood in her apartment like a ghost, haunting a life he'd never really been part of. See-through, insubstantial. The weight of his apology followed her down 12 flights of stairs. She didn't trust the elevator anymore. Didn't trust anything that might trap her in a small space with witnesses, with cameras, with the possibility of doors that didn't open. If they dig deeper, we're finished. The notification came while Nari was pretending to prep inventory she couldn't afford to order. Going through the motions, moving vegetables from crate to cooler, her hands busy even if her mind was elsewhere. Her phone lit up with a message from a number she didn't recognize. Just digits, no name. The anonymity itself a warning. You should see this. The link led to Korean News Daily, a blog known for mixing legitimate journalism with sensational gossip, the digital equivalent of a tabloid that occasionally stumbled into real news. The headline made her stomach drop, the words seeming to pulse on the screen. Wanted. Kenyan political fugitive spotted in Seoul. Daughter runs unlicensed restaurant. Below it, a photograph. Kip entering her building, the angle suggesting a security camera capture, but the clarity implying someone had enhanced it, cleaned it up, made it deliberately recognizable. And worse, a second photo of Nari at the pop-up window, her face caught mid-smile as she handed food to a customer, captioned, Kim Nari, 29, operates Afro-Fusion establishment while harboring father linked to Nairobi corruption scandal. Her phone began vibrating, continuous, urgent, the notifications flooding in like water breaching a dam. Text messages from numbers she recognized, mostly from numbers she didn't. Customers canceling reservations that hadn't existed yet. Former culinary school classmates suddenly remembering they had her contact information, reaching out with concern that felt more like curiosity. A reporter asking for an interview. Just want your side of the story. Then Soo Jin's name appeared, cutting through the chaos. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would blow up like this. Nari's hand tightened around the phone, her knuckles going white, the plastic case creaking under pressure. Didn't know what would blow up? 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Appeared again in the maddening dance of someone typing and deleting, unable to commit to words. Then, can we talk? Not over text. The pop-up door opened, the bell above it chiming cheerfully, oblivious. A woman in her 50s entered, looked around with the sharp assessment of someone pricing everything she saw, her eyes cataloging equipment and violations with equal interest. Are you Kim Nari? We're closed for inventory. Nari kept her voice level, professional, even though she wanted to scream. I'm from the public health office. The woman pulled out a tablet from her structured bag, stylus already in hand. We've received complaints about food safety violations. I need to see your preparation area. I passed inspection 3 weeks ago. The certificate was framed on the wall, official stamps and signatures visible. This is a new complaint, filed this morning. The woman was already photographing, the tablet making artificial shutter sounds with each capture. Multiple anonymous reports of unsanitary conditions, unlicensed staff, possible health code violations. Nari watched her restaurant, her dream, get dissected by a bureaucrat with a camera and an agenda. Every smudge became evidence. Every worn pot became negligence. The woman spent 40 minutes documenting failures that didn't exist, finding violations in the gap between perfection and reality, the space where actual cooking happened. You'll receive an official report in 5 business days, she said, not looking up from her tablet as she typed notes with her thumbs. Until then, this location is temporarily closed pending review. You can't, Nari started, her voice rising. I can, and I am. The woman finally met her eyes, cold, bureaucratic, already moving on to the next inspection. You should have been more careful about who you associated with, Miss Kim. She left, the door chiming again, the cheerful sound now mocking. Nari stood alone in her empty restaurant, surrounded by spices that suddenly smelled like failure. Coriander and cumin and berbere that had promised fusion and delivered only wreckage. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, another cancellation, another door closing in her face. Each notification a small death. The blog post had over 10,000 shares, the number climbing in real time as she watched. The comments section was a cesspool of speculation, racism, and the particular cruelty of anonymous judgment. She's probably helping him hide money. These mixed people never know where their loyalty belongs. Deport them both. They didn't just find him, they named him. The coffee shop Park Min-jae chose was expensive and quiet, the kind of place where businessmen negotiated deals in hushed voices, where the lighting was deliberately flattering and the chairs cost more than Nari's monthly rent. He was already seated when she arrived, a cup of tea steaming untouched in front of him, the liquid going cold while he waited. His coat was draped over the chair with careful precision. Even his clothing seemed to know its place, arranged with the attention to detail of someone who believed presentation was power. Miss Kim. Thank you for meeting me. His voice was warm, almost friendly, the tone of someone offering help rather than threat. I didn't have a choice. Nari sat but didn't order anything, refusing to participate in the theater of casual conversation. Your message said it was urgent. Everything about your situation is urgent now. Park Min-jae slid a folder across the table. Manila. Thick, heavy with documentation. The blog post has generated significant attention. My supervisors are receiving calls from multiple agencies. Your father's presence in Korea is now a matter of public record. Nari opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside, photographs of Kip at various locations, time-stamped and GPS tagged. A map of his movements through Seoul, his attempts at invisibility documented with clinical precision. Copies of the documents he'd mentioned. Financial records, testimony transcripts, communications between Kenyan officials with names highlighted in yellow. Evidence of everything he'd been running from. Everything that made him dangerous to people with power. Where did you get these? Her voice came out hoarse. We have resources. Park Min-jae's voice remained pleasant, almost gentle. A therapist's voice, a friend's voice. The question isn't what we know, Miss Kim. The question is what we do with that knowledge. What do you want? I want to help you. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers, the intensity making her want to look away, but she held his gaze. You're a talented chef. You have potential to contribute meaningfully to Seoul's culinary scene. Your mother was Korean. You have every right to be here. But your father, he let the sentence hang, unfinished, the blank space more threatening than any complete accusation. Your father is a complication, a liability. He's brought international attention to Korea's immigration enforcement, which makes people very uncomfortable. People who determine whether you stay or go. So you want me to turn him in? Simple, direct. The truth stripped of euphemism. I want you to cooperate. Tell us where he's staying, what he's planning. Help us resolve this quietly, and your visa review will conclude favorably. Your restaurant can reopen. You can have the life you've been working toward. Park Min-jae pulled out a second document, a cooperation agreement, already prepared with her name typed in the blank spaces, just waiting for a signature. All you have to do is sign. Tell us what we need to know, and by tomorrow this nightmare ends. He pushed a pen across the table. Expensive, heavy, fountain pen with gold trim, the kind that signed important things. The kind that changed lives. Think about it. Your father made his choices. He ran from his responsibilities. He brought this on himself. Why should you pay for his mistakes? The pen sat between them like a loaded gun. Present, powerful, waiting. In the window reflection, Nari could see her own face. Exhausted, afraid, caught between two countries and two identities that refused to reconcile. Her mother's Korean features warring with her father's Kenyan bone structure, the hyphen in her DNA suddenly visible, damning. How long do I have to decide? 24 hours. After that, we proceed without your cooperation. And Miss Kim? Park Min-jae's smile was kind in the way a surgeon's knife is kind. Precise and clinical, and ultimately causing pain for your own good. Without cooperation, we can't protect you from what comes next. He stood. The motion fluid, practiced, left money for both their drinks, exact change, no tip. walked out with the confidence of someone who knew the answer before asking the question. The folder remained on the table. Inside it, proof of her father's crimes and her own complicity, the blueprint for her salvation or her destruction, depending on which way she fell. He said this was my last clean exit. Sujin's apartment was in Gangnam. Small but carefully curated, every piece of furniture chosen for how it would look in photographs, artfully arranged for maximum Instagram potential. Nari had been here dozens of times, drinking cheap wine that stained their teeth purple, and laughing about the absurdity of trying to make it in Seoul's cutthroat food scene. Now the familiar space felt like foreign territory. She noticed things she'd never seen before. The staging of it, the performance. Sujin opened the door wearing pajamas at 3 p.m., her auburn bob uncombed, sticking up at odd angles. Phone clutched in one hand like a security blanket, like a lifeline, her thumb hovering over the screen. "You said we needed to talk," Nari said, not moving to enter. "Come in, please." The word cracked with desperation. They sat on opposite ends of the couch. Too much distance for friends, not enough for strangers. Sujin poured tea neither of them would drink, the ritual giving her hands something to do. Her hands shook slightly as she set down the pot, the ceramic clattering against ceramic. "The blog post," Nari said, diving in without preamble. "Korean News Daily. They had information only someone close to me would know. The pop-up schedule. My apartment building. Details about my visa status. Nari, I swear I didn't." "Don't lie to me." Nari's voice stayed level, but something dangerous moved beneath it. A predator's stillness before striking. "I've known you for 3 years. You wrote the first article about my food. You're the only person outside my family who knows about my father. Who else could it have been?" Sujin finally looked up, and her eyes were red-rimmed. From crying or lack of sleep or guilt, impossible to tell. It wasn't supposed to go like this. The admission landed like a physical blow. Nari felt it in her solar plexus, all the air leaving her lungs at once. "You did this. You actually—" She stood, paced to the window, her hands clenching and unclenching. "Why? What did I ever do to you?" "Nothing. You did nothing. That's the problem." Sujin's composure cracked, her voice rising, years of resentment suddenly pouring out. "Do you know what it's like? Watching you waltz into Seoul with your interesting backstory and your fusion concept and your tragic mixed-race narrative that editors love? I've been writing about food for 6 years. 6 years of covering other people's dreams while mine go nowhere. So you destroyed me out of jealousy?" Nari turned back, staring at this woman she thought she knew. "I didn't mean to destroy you. I just—" Sujin's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible, ashamed. "Korean News Daily offered me a staff position. Real money, benefits, bylines that matter. But they wanted something big, something exclusive. And when your father showed up, when you told me he was in trouble, I told you in confidence." The words exploded out of Nari. "I know." Tears ran down Sujin's face. Real tears, genuine distress. But Nari felt nothing. "I told myself it was just information, just news. That I wasn't betraying you, I was just reporting facts. But the editor wanted more. Photos, timeline, immigration angle. It snowballed. And by the time I realized what I'd done, the post was live." Nari stared at her former friend, the woman who'd introduced her to kimchi suppliers, who'd taught her subway shortcuts, who'd been her only anchor in a city that looked at mixed-race faces with curiosity and suspicion. The morning light made Sujin look small and pathetic, like a child who'd broken something precious and couldn't understand why sorry wouldn't fix it, why some things stayed broken. "Did they give you the job?" Nari's voice was ice. "Yes, congratulations." Nari moved toward the door, each step deliberate. "I hope it was worth it." "Nari, please." Sujin reached out, her hand grasping air. "Don't contact me again. Don't write about me. Don't even say my name." She turned back one last time, needing to deliver this final blow. "You sold me out for a byline and health insurance. I hope every article you write tastes like ash." Outside, the Gangnam streets were crowded with people who had places to be, lives that made sense. Designer bags and confident strides in the particular Seoul style of looking purposefully busy. Nari stood on the sidewalk and felt the last thread connecting her to Seoul snap. Audible only to her, but final. First her restaurant, then her visa. Now the only friendship she'd managed to build in 3 years of trying to belong. That's when I knew I was alone. Kip was waiting when she got home, sitting at her small dining table with papers spread around him like evidence at a crime scene. Documents arranged in careful piles, organized by some system only he understood. He looked up when she entered, and something in her face made him set down the document he'd been reading, his hand going still mid-gesture. What happened? His voice was careful, gentle. Soo-jin. Nari dropped her bag by the door. Let it fall rather than set it down. She's the leak. She sold us out for a job. Kip's jaw tightened. She watched the muscle jump beneath the skin, his hand clenching into a fist on the table. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. Just tell me the truth. All of it. She moved to the table, standing over him. What's in those documents that's worth destroying both our lives? For a long moment, Kip just looked at her. Weighing something, making calculations she couldn't see. Then he gestured to the papers on the table with a sweeping motion. Sit down. Nari sat, the chair scraping against the floor, harsh and loud. 2 years ago, Kip began, each word chosen with care. I was working with a coalition investigating election fraud in Kenya. We had evidence, real evidence, of ballot stuffing, voter intimidation, money laundering through shell companies. The kind of corruption that keeps dictators in power and gets journalists killed. He pushed a document toward her, his fingers leaving prints on the paper. Financial records, names highlighted in yellow, amounts that made her eyes widen. Numbers with too many zeros, transactions that shouldn't exist. 3 members of our coalition were murdered. Car accidents that weren't accidents. Robberies that only stole phones and computers, left wallets and jewelry untouched. I was next. They came to my house at night. 3 men with guns. I barely got out. So you ran. Simple statement. No judgment yet. I ran because I thought if I could get the evidence somewhere safe, somewhere with international attention, maybe it could still matter. Maybe their deaths wouldn't be for nothing. His hands trembled as he gathered the papers, stacking them, unstacking them, needing something to do. But running meant leaving you unprotected. If I'd stayed in Kenya, if I'd gone public then, they would have used you as leverage, found you in Seoul, threatened you, hurt you to get to me. So instead you brought the danger directly to my door. Her voice was flat. No, I thought... Kip's voice broke like glass dropped on concrete. I thought enough time had passed, that they'd moved on, that coming here for a few days while I figured out asylum options would be safe. I was wrong. I'm always wrong when it comes to protecting you. Nari picked up one of the documents. The paper cheap, the ink slightly smudged. Names of politicians, amounts transferred, dates of payments that corresponded to election cycles. The kind of information that toppled governments or got whistleblowers disappeared, depending on who had more power. If these go public, she said slowly, thinking through implications, what happens? International scandal, investigations, maybe prosecutions, maybe nothing. Depends on whether anyone actually cares. His voice was bitter. But the people who ordered those murders will lose power, and they'll do anything to stop that, including kill you. Yes. And now me, by association. The logic was simple, brutal. Kip nodded. A small movement, but definitive. If these papers surface, people will die. Maybe more journalists. Maybe witnesses. Maybe... Me, Nari finished. Maybe me. The apartment fell silent except for the hum of traffic 12 floors below. Car horns and bus brakes, and the ambient noise of a city that never stopped. Nari looked at the documents. Evidence of someone else's war, someone else's fight for justice, her father's cause, his mission. The thing he'd valued more than being her father, more than watching her grow up. Why did you really come here, Kip? The truth this time. She met his eyes, refusing to look away. He met her gaze, held it, didn't flinch. Because you're the only family I have left, and I was terrified of dying alone. The honesty was worse than any lie would have been. Raw, undeniable, pathetic in its nakedness. If these papers surface, people will die. The proof came in an email at midnight. Nari was lying awake, staring at her ceiling, watching car headlights sweep across plaster and create moving shadows. Her phone lit up, the blue light harsh in the darkness. The sender was anonymous. A burner email address, random letters and numbers that meant nothing. No subject line. Just an attachment with a file name that was more random characters. She opened it, her thumb moving on instinct. Chat logs, screenshots of Kakao Talk conversations between Soo-jin and an editor at Korean News Daily, time-stamped over 3 weeks. Going back long before the blog post went live, before Nari had even known her father was coming. Each screenshot precisely captured, meticulously documented. Soo-jin had written on November 28th, "I might have something big. Can't say what yet. Need to confirm a few things." The editor replied, "How big?" Soo-jin, "Immigration scandal big. Mixed-race chef, fugitive parent, possible illegal harboring. Could be front page." The editor on November 29th, "Get me details. If it's solid, we're talking staff position." The messages continued. A breadcrumb trail of betrayal. Soo-jin asking Nari careful questions about her father, her visa, her restaurant timeline. Questions disguised as friendship, as concern. Nari answering honestly because they were friends, because she trusted someone in a city where she'd felt perpetually foreign, perpetually other. Then dated yesterday, the final confirmation, Soo-jin on December 18th, posted, "Traffic is already insane. 15K shares in 2 hours. The editor, excellent work. HR will send your contract tomorrow. Welcome to the team." Soo-jin, "Thank you. This is going to change everything." Nari read the messages 3 times, each reading making them more real, more undeniable. Felt something cold and final settle in her chest where friendship used to live, where trust had made a home. Soo-jin hadn't made a mistake, hadn't gotten caught up in the moment. She'd been planning this for weeks, cultivating information like a gardener growing poison, building a story, packaging Nari's life into clickable content. Friendship as commodity, trust as currency. The apartment door opened. Kip appearing in her doorway, his face creased with sleep and worry, wearing the same clothes he'd worn for 3 days. "What's wrong?" "I heard..." "Nothing's wrong." Nari's voice sounded distant even to herself, like she was hearing it through water. "Everything's just becoming clear." She showed him the email, turned her phone so he could see, watched his expression shift from confusion to anger to something sadder. Recognition of a betrayal he'd probably seen coming. In his world of political backstabbing and calculated violence, friendship was probably just another commodity to be traded, another tool to be used and discarded. "Who sent this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Does it matter?" Nari's laugh was hollow. "Someone wanted me to know the truth. Maybe Park Min-jae. Maybe someone else who wants me isolated and desperate. Maybe someone who just thought I deserved to know." She stood, her joints protesting, her body stiff from lying tense in bed. Moved to the window. Drawn by the lights of Seoul like a moth to flame. Rain was starting, Seoul lights blurring through water on glass, the city becoming impressionistic, beautiful in its dissolution. Everyone's playing chess, and I'm still trying to figure out what game we're in. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the anonymous email, the notification making her flinch. "The raid is tomorrow. 6 a.m. They have a warrant." Nari showed Kip, her hands steady now, past fear into acceptance. His face went pale, the blood draining so fast she thought he might faint. "Then I need to leave now, before they come for you." He was already moving, reaching for his duffel bag. "Where will you go?" "I don't know." His hands were shaking as he stuffed clothes into the bag. "But I can't let them arrest me here. That makes you complicit. That ends your life in Korea." Nari looked out at the city, the place her mother had loved, had believed would save them, had died believing in, the place she'd tried so hard to belong to, the place that had never really wanted her except as an exotic curiosity or a cautionary tale. Seoul the beautiful. Seoul the cruel. Maybe my life here was already over, she said quietly, her breath fogging the glass. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. Outside, the rain fell harder, sheets of water washing the streets, cleaning nothing. The streets emptied as people sought shelter. Somewhere in the city, Park Min-jae was probably sleeping peacefully, confident in the trap he'd set. Soo-jin was probably celebrating her new job, toasting with colleagues who didn't know what it had cost. And Nari stood in her apartment with a father she barely knew, watching everything she'd built dissolve like sugar in water, like salt in rain, like every dream that touched reality. She sold us out to survive. The call from the investor came at 7 a.m., before Nari had even pretended to sleep, before she'd managed to close her eyes for more than a few minutes. Mr. Choi's voice was apologetic but firm, the tone of someone delivering bad news they'd rehearsed in the mirror, finding the right balance of regret and finality. Given the recent media attention and the immigration complications, we've decided to withdraw our offer. I'm sure you understand. This is a business decision. Of course, Nari said. Because what else was there to say? What argument could she make? Thank you for considering the project. She hung up, pressed the red button and watched the call timer disappear. Looked at Kip, who'd been awake all night packing his few belongings into the same worn duffel bag he'd arrived with, the zipper struggling with the bulk. They pulled out, she said unnecessarily. He'd heard. The walls were thin. By 9 a.m., 2 more potential investors had sent polite rejections via email. Form letters essentially, the kind that could be sent to anyone. By 10, the landlord who'd been negotiating a lease for a permanent location called to say the space had been claimed by another party. His voice carefully neutral, revealing nothing. By noon, Nari's bank sent a letter formally denying her small business loan application, based on updated risk assessment. She sat on her apartment floor surrounded by the wreckage of her dream. Business plans no one would fund, recipes no one would taste, permits for a restaurant that would never exist. 3 years of work erased in 72 hours, the speed of destruction always faster than the pace of creation. Papers spread around her like accusation, like evidence, like the physical manifestation of failure. I should go to the embassy, Kip said quietly, crouching beside her but not touching. Kenya's. Request asylum officially. It'll take months to process, but at least I'd be in the system. Legal. You could say I deceived you about my situation, that you didn't know I was wanted. That's still harboring. Simple. True. Legal fact. Maybe, but it's better than what happens if they raid this apartment and find me here. He crouched beside her, his worn face level with hers. 2 failures, father and daughter, finally on the same plane. Nari Bear. I've spent 22 years running from consequences, but I can't run from this one. Not if it means destroying you. Nari looked at the man who'd given her half her DNA and none of his presence, studying his face like she was seeing him for the first time. She'd spent years constructing an image of him, villain or victim, depending on her mood, on how angry she felt on any given day. But sitting here in her failed apartment, watching him prepare to surrender himself to an uncertain fate, she realized he was neither. He was just a man who'd made choices that seemed right at the time and had been paying for them ever since. Flawed, human, hers. What happens if you surrender, she asked, her voice small. Deportation probably. Trial in Kenya. If the evidence I have doesn't matter to the international community, then prison. Maybe 10 years, maybe more. If it does matter, he shrugged, the motion conveying decades of uncertainty. Maybe witness protection. Maybe still prison, but with better PR. And if you don't surrender, they arrest me here. You get charged with harboring, your visa gets revoked, you lose everything and still don't get to keep your father. His voice was matter-of-fact, laying out the math of their shared destruction. The apartment felt smaller with every passing second, the walls closing in, the ceiling lowering. Outside, Seoul moved on. People going to jobs that still existed, living lives that made sense, following paths that had clear destinations. Nari thought about her mother, who'd brought her here believing Korea would offer opportunities Kenya couldn't. What would she say now? Watching her daughter choose between 2 countries that both wanted to reject her. Would she understand? Would she be disappointed? Would she have made a different choice? I'm coming with you, Nari said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. What? To the embassy. If you're going to surrender, I'm not letting you do it alone. She stood, grabbed her coat from the hook by the door. You said blood doesn't ask permission. Well, it also doesn't abandon people in deportation offices. Kip's eyes filled with tears he didn't let fall. They gathered at the edges, threatening to spill but held back by will or pride or the habit of not showing weakness. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. That's what makes it a choice. She held out her hand to help him up. She locked the apartment door, knowing she might never unlock it again, the key turning with a finality that felt ceremonial. The pop-up space was already shuttered, officially closed by health inspectors who'd found violations that didn't exist. Manufactured problems to justify a predetermined conclusion. Her visa was flagged. Her restaurant was dead. She had nothing left to lose except the one thing she'd never really had, a father. This was the moment I had to choose who I am. They never made it to the Kenyan embassy. Park Min-jae was waiting in the lobby of Nari's building, occupying one of the chairs meant for residents, his presence immediately wrong. Flanked by two officers in uniform, badges catching the fluorescent light, creating small stars on their chests. His coat was unbuttoned, his expression almost sympathetic. The look of someone who'd predicted exactly this outcome and took no pleasure in being right. Miss Kim, Mr. Odiambo. He nodded to each of them, a small gesture, acknowledging them as individuals before crushing them as problems. Going somewhere? That's not your concern, Nari said, straightening her spine, pulling back her shoulders, making herself bigger, more present. Actually, it's precisely my concern. Your father is wanted for questioning regarding his immigration status, and you, Miss Kim, are wanted for questioning regarding potential violations of the Immigration Control Act, Article 94. The legal language rolled off his tongue like poetry, practiced and perfect. The officers moved forward, synchronized, trained, hands resting casually on their belts near equipment that could restrain, could hurt if necessary. Kip stepped slightly in front of Nari, an instinct, protection she didn't need, but that meant something anyway, that changed the shape of their relationship in that single motion. Where are you taking us? Nari demanded, her voice steady. Somewhere we can talk privately. Park Min-jae's smile never wavered. Painted on, permanent. No arrests. Not yet. Just conversation. They rode in separate cars to the Immigration Services building in Yangcheongu. Nari watching Seoul pass through tinted windows, the city looking different from the back of an official vehicle. A gray concrete structure that looked exactly like what it was. A place where futures got decided by strangers, where bureaucracy exercised power with forms and stamps and the terrible authority of the state. Park Min-jae led them to a small office on the 4th floor, gestured for them to sit. The chairs uncomfortable, designed that way, asserting dominance through discomfort. Closed the door with a quiet click that sounded like a cell locking, metal on metal. Here's where we are, he said, settling behind his desk with the comfort of someone in their natural habitat. Mr. Odiambo is in Korea illegally. Miss Kim has harbored him, lied to officials, and obstructed an investigation. These are deportable offenses, career-ending offenses. We were going to the embassy, Nari started, leaning forward, but you didn't. You hesitated, and in that hesitation, you made a choice. Park Min-jae pulled out a document, the same cooperation agreement from the coffee shop, slightly revised, edges worn from being carried. This is still available, but the terms have changed. He slid it across the desk. The paper moving in slow motion, covering the distance between them with terrible inevitability. Nari read it, felt her stomach turn. Nausea rising, bile in her throat. You want me to testify that my father coerced me? That I was afraid of him? That I'm a victim? It's a reasonable narrative. One that protects you. His tone was gentle, persuasive. It's a lie. It's survival. Park Min-jae leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, hands clasped, the posture of someone sharing wisdom. Look at your situation clearly, Miss Kim. Your restaurant is gone. Your investors have fled. Your visa is flagged. You have no income, no prospects, and no allies. But if you sign this document, if you provide testimony that helps us close this case cleanly, I can make the flag disappear. I can facilitate a new business license application. I can give you back your life in exchange for disowning my father, in exchange for telling a version of the truth that benefits everyone. His voice was gentle, almost kind, a therapist's voice, a savior's voice. He did abandon you as a child. He did show up uninvited and bring chaos into your life. These are facts. We're just contextualizing them in a way that acknowledges you were victimized rather than complicit. Nari looked at Kip. Seeking what, she didn't know. Permission? Absolution? His face was carefully neutral, but she could see the resignation in his eyes, the slope of his shoulders. He'd already decided she should sign, already made peace with being the villain if it meant she survived, already written himself out of her story. How long do I have to decide, she asked, stalling. You're deciding now. Today. This offer expires the moment you walk out of this office. Park Min-jae pushed a pen across the desk. Expensive, heavy, the kind of pen that signed important things, treaties and contracts and confessions. Your father will be deported regardless. This only determines what happens to you. Do you want to lose everything for a man who's never been there for you? Or do you want to finally choose yourself? The office had no windows, deliberately windowless, designed to disorient. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving, revealing every imperfection. In that sterile space, Nari could see two futures splitting like a forked path. One where she signed and built a life on the lie that she'd been her father's victim, and one where she refused and paid for honesty with everything she'd worked for. Both paths led to loss. The question was what kind of loss she could live with. All I had to do was sign. Nari picked up the pen, her fingers closing around expensive metal, feeling its weight. Park Min-jae's expression shifted. Satisfaction carefully masked as professional relief, the subtle relaxation of someone who'd won. Kip closed his eyes, his shoulders dropping in defeat or acceptance or both, his head tilting forward like a man facing execution. She held the pen for 3 seconds, 5, 10, each second stretching, time becoming elastic. Then she set it down, the click of metal on wood, decisive, final. I need to use the bathroom, she said, her voice steady. Miss Kim. Park Min-jae's hand moved toward the document, protective. Unless you've criminalized basic bodily functions, I have the right to use a bathroom before signing legal documents. She stood, her chair scraping back. Park Min-jae's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath skin, irritation flashing in his eyes before he controlled it. But he nodded. Down the hall. First door on the left. You have 5 minutes. Nari walked out, felt both officers' eyes on her back, heat between her shoulder blades, the weight of surveillance. The hallway was institutional, linoleum floors that squeaked under her sneakers, motivational posters about civic duty showing diverse faces smiling at jobs well done, the smell of cheap coffee and bureaucracy and fear absorbed into the walls. She found the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, the lock flimsy, providing only the illusion of privacy. Pulled out her phone with shaking hands. The files were still there. Kip's documents, transferred to her phone days ago when he'd first shown them to her, backed up to a cloud account she'd created specifically for this. Evidence of corruption, murder, election fraud, everything he'd been protecting, everything powerful people wanted buried, wanted erased, wanted to disappear along with everyone who knew about them. She opened her email, fingers trembling so badly she had to type slowly. Started a new message. In the to field, she typed addresses she'd memorized from late-night research, from contingency planning she'd hoped she wouldn't need. Al Jazeera's tip line, Reuters' Africa desk, the BBC's investigative unit, the Guardian's news desk, the New York Times international team, 3 human rights organizations with reputations for following through, and every major international news outlet she could think of. A carpet bombing of information. Subject line, urgent, Kenyan election fraud evidence, source under threat body. Attached documents prove systemic corruption in Kenya's recent election. Whistleblower Joseph Odhiambo currently faces deportation from South Korea. Release these immediately. Lives depend on exposure. She attached every file, every document, every piece of evidence Kip had been carrying, everything he'd protected for 2 years. Then with shaking hands, her thumb hovering over the button for 5 seconds of doubt, she hit send. The email whooshed into the void, that artificial sound of messages departing, meaningless but satisfying. No taking it back. No second thoughts. The bridge burning behind her, flames rising high enough to see from space. She returned to Park Min-jae's office, each step deliberate, her heart hammering but her face calm. He looked up expectantly, gestured to the document still waiting on his desk, the pen exactly where she'd left it. Ready to proceed? I need to tell you something first, Nari said. Her voice was steady, clearer than it had been in days. The clarity that came from committing to a course of action, from choosing, from letting go of all the paths not taken. 2 minutes ago, I sent my father's documents to every major international news organization I could find. By tomorrow morning, this will be a global story, not an immigration problem, not a visa complication, a whistleblower protection case. Park Min-jae's face went white, the blood draining so fast it was almost comical, his skin turning the color of old paper. You did what? I burned it all down. Every bridge you offered me. Every exit. Every comfortable lie. She looked at Kip, whose expression had shifted from defeat to something like awe, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. You want him? Fine. Deport him. But now the whole world is watching, and I promise you, Korea doesn't want the international headline. Whistleblower deported hours after evidence release. You just destroyed your own life, Park Min-jae said, his calm finally cracking. Voice rising, hands flat on the desk, pushing himself to standing. No, I just decided what my life is worth. Her phone started buzzing, continuous vibration against her hip, notifications flooding in like a dam breaking. Email notifications, automated responses from news desks, confirmation receipts. Already one reply from Reuters flashing across her screen. Documents received. Reviewing now. Need to verify source. Can you provide contact information? Within 10 minutes, the first article appeared online. Al Jazeera, fast and hungry for the story. Breaking evidence of Kenya. Election fraud released by whistleblower facing deportation. The attached documents were already being downloaded, verified, shared across networks of journalists and activists and people who cared about truth more than convenience. Park Min-jae's phone rang. The sound sharp, urgent. Then again. Then a third time, each call more insistent. He answered the last one, his face going from pale to ashen as he listened to whoever was on the other end. His superior probably, someone with more power and less patience. Understood, he said finally, his voice tight. Yes, sir. I'll handle it. He hung up, set the phone down with exaggerated care. Looked at Nari with something between fury and grudging respect, the expression of someone who'd been outplayed and knew it. You're under arrest, he said, each word clipped. Both of you. Pending investigation. Good, Nari replied, crossing her arms. Arrest me in front of cameras. Make it official. Let them photograph a Korean Kenyan chef being detained for protecting a whistleblower. See how that plays internationally. Outside the building, sirens were already starting. The sound filtering through walls, growing louder. News vans, maybe. Police backup, definitely. The story was breaking faster than anyone could contain it, spreading like wildfire, like floodwater, like anything that couldn't be stopped once it started. I burned every bridge in one click. The detention lasted 18 hours. Nari spent them in a holding room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation, watching the story explode across international media through the small window of her confiscated then returned phone. Reuters had verified the documents within 4 hours. The Guardian was running profiles of the murdered journalists by hour 6. Al Jazeera had already interviewed 2 Kenyan opposition leaders calling for investigations, their faces filling her small screen with righteous anger. By morning, 3 human rights organizations had filed formal complaints with the South Korean government. using diplomatic channels, applying pressure. By afternoon, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees had issued a statement urging Korea to grant Kip temporary protection pending asylum review. The international community paying attention, finally, because Nari had forced them to look. Park Min-jae released them at 8 p.m. without apology or explanation. Just handed back their belongings in clear plastic bags and said, "You'll receive official notifications via mail." His face was neutral, professional, revealing nothing of what this had cost him. The notifications came 3 days later, delivered by registered mail, requiring signatures, making everything official. Kip's arrived first, in a thin envelope, temporary protected status granted pending asylum application review. Duration, 6 months, renewable. Conditions, report weekly to immigration services, no travel outside Seoul. Employment prohibited, he was free, trapped, monitored, and unable to work, but alive and legal and visible. The international attention had done exactly what Nari had gambled it would. Made him too visible to disappear quietly, turned him from criminal to cause. Her notification came 2 days after his, in a thicker envelope, F-27 visa status, revoked. Grounds, material misrepresentation, harboring of individual under investigation, obstruction of immigration enforcement, departure required within 30 days. No appeal permitted. Nari read it sitting on her apartment floor, surrounded by boxes she'd been avoiding packing. The cardboard accusatory, demanding attention. 30 days to dismantle a life. 4 weeks to say goodbye to the country her mother had believed would save them both, had died believing in. Kip found her there at midnight, staring at nothing, or staring at everything, at the future she no longer had. "I'm sorry," he said for the 1,000th time, the words worn smooth by repetition. "Stop." Her voice was tired, not angry, past anger into something like acceptance. "I made the choice. I live with it. You shouldn't have to, but I do. That's how choices work." She stood, began wrapping dishes in newspaper. The motion automatic, something to do with her hands. Her mother's dishes, the ones she'd inherited, Korean pottery that had survived one ocean crossing already. "The documents are out. People are paying attention. You're safe. That's what matters. You matter. I matter enough that I couldn't sign that paper. That has to be enough." She wrapped another dish, the newspaper crinkling. The apartment slowly emptied. Nari sold what she could through online marketplaces and secondhand shops. Furniture, appliances, the kitchen equipment she'd bought dreaming of the restaurant that would never be. Each sale was surgical, removing parts of her life piece by piece. The pop-up space's final inspection revealed satisfactory conditions, a spite-filled vindication that came too late to matter, arriving in an official letter after she'd already been evicted. The health violations had never existed. Everyone had always known. Sujin tried to call once. Nari watched the name flash on her screen, let it ring until a voicemail picked up, blocked the number without listening to the message. Some bridges stayed burned. A package arrived from the Kenyan embassy, papers regarding Kip's asylum application, forms to fill out, timelines that stretched into uncertainty. A letter from an official thanking him for his courage and service to democratic transparency. Flowery language that sounded good in press releases. The letter didn't mention Nari's name. Heroes only ever had room for one protagonist. Martyrs were footnotes. 2 weeks before her departure date, a journalist from the Korea Herald asked for an interview, called her mobile, introduced himself, asked if she'd be willing to talk. Nari almost refused, then realized she had nothing left to protect, nothing left to lose. They met at a coffee shop in Itaewon, neutral territory for the perpetually foreign, where mixed faces didn't draw stares. "Why did you do it?" the journalist asked, recorder running on the table between them, red light blinking. "You knew releasing those documents would cost you everything." Nari thought about it. Really thought, not giving the easy answer. About her mother dying in a hospital speaking Korean, about growing up feeling split between continents like torn paper, about trying to stitch two cultures together with food and hope, and stubborn refusal to choose. "Because I spent my whole life trying to be Korean enough or Kenyan enough to deserve belonging," she said finally, each word chosen with care. But enough for who? For people who'd revoke my visa over my father's sins? For a country that only wanted the exotic parts of me when they were profitable? She met the journalist's eyes, held his gaze. I couldn't sign that paper because it meant agreeing I was less than whole, that my father, my Kenyan half, was something to be ashamed of and buried. And I've spent too many years being ashamed to keep doing it. The article ran the next day under a sympathetic headline, Chef Who Chose Truth Over Visa, Kim Nari's Last Days in Seoul. It was kind, thoughtful, well-written, and completely useless. Sympathy didn't reverse deportation orders. Clicks didn't grant visas. On her last night in the apartment, Nari cooked. Not fusion, not innovation, just her mother's kimchi jjigae, exactly the way she taught Nari when she was 8 years old, standing on a stool to reach the stove. The smell filled the empty rooms. Fermented cabbage and gochugaru and anchovy broth made them feel lived in one last time, made them feel like home. Kip emerged from the spare room where he'd been sleeping, drawn by the smell like a ghost to familiar territory. That smells like... Mom. I know. Nari ladled soup into bowls, the only dishes she hadn't packed yet. Sit. They ate in silence. Spoons against ceramic, the slurp of broth, the sounds of consumption instead of conversation. The stew was perfect, sour and spicy and warming, the taste of Seoul winter nights and a mother who tried her best with the hands she'd been dealt. Nari wondered if she'd ever make it again, wherever she ended up, if the taste would comfort or haunt, if she'd remember this moment or try to forget it. Where will you go? Kip asked, setting down his spoon. I don't know yet. My Korean citizenship was always contingent on behavior, on being good enough. My Kenyan citizenship lapsed when I was 12 because Mom couldn't afford the renewal fees. She smiled without humor, the expression not reaching her eyes. I'm functionally stateless, the ultimate mixed-race experience, belonging everywhere and nowhere. I can help. He reached toward her. With what? You can't work, can't leave Seoul. You're as trapped as I am, just in a different cage. She wasn't being cruel, just honest. The kind of honesty that only came after everything else had burned away. We both made our choices, we both pay. Through the window, Seoul glittered, indifferent and beautiful, neon reflecting off rain-slick streets. 12 floors down, people were living lives that wouldn't be interrupted by visa status or political scandals or the messy consequences of choosing family over safety. Normal lives. Simple lives. Nari finished her soup, scraped the bowl clean, not wasting a drop. Washed the dishes, the hot water turning her hands red. Packed them in boxes marked for charity, someone else's future written in permanent marker. Freedom always sends a bill. Incheon Airport at dawn was a cathedral of departures, soaring ceilings and polished floors and the particular emptiness of spaces designed for transition. Nari stood in the check-in line with 2 suitcases containing everything she hadn't sold or donated. Clothes, some books, her mother's recipe notebook written half in Korean and half in English, switching languages mid-recipe when emotion overwhelmed grammar, or when certain concepts only existed in one language. Kip had wanted to come, had asked, had practically begged. Nari had refused. Goodbyes at security checkpoints felt too cinematic, too much like the kind of scene that implied resolution, when all she felt was unfinished, when all she carried was loose ends and questions without answers. Her ticket was one way to Nairobi, not because she wanted to go to Kenya, a country she barely remembered, where her childhood memories were sun-baked and fragmented, but because it was the only embassy that had agreed to issue emergency travel documents to a woman whose identity existed primarily in expired paperwork and DNA tests. Checking bags? The airline attendant asked in Korean, her voice cheerful, professional, completely unaware. Yes, both. Final destination? I'm not sure yet. Honest. True. The attendant looked up, confused, her hands pausing over the keyboard. Nari didn't elaborate. How do you explain that your final destination is wherever will have you? That home is a concept you're still learning to define? That belonging might not be a place at all? Security took 20 minutes, the usual ritual of removal and exposure. Nari removed her shoes, placed her carry-on in the gray bin, walked through the metal detector that beeped for the small silver necklace her mother had given her. Korean on one side, Kenyan on the other, a constant reminder that she was a hyphen, a bridge, a question without a clean answer. The security guard waved her through anyway. The departure gate was nearly empty. Her flight too early for most travelers, the space echoing. She bought overpriced coffee and sat by the window, watching planes take off and land in the pre-dawn gray. Metal birds carrying people to places that would welcome them or reject them. Random chance dressed up as immigration policy. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is Kip, borrowed phone from caseworker. I know you said no goodbyes, but I need to say thank you. Not as fugitive to helper, as father to daughter. You saved my life. I'm sorry it cost yours." Nari typed and deleted 3 responses, each one inadequate, unable to capture the complexity. Finally settled on, "It's not lost, just different." Another message, this one from the Korea Herald journalist. "Your story got picked up internationally. BBC wants to interview you. Guardian asking for follow-up. You've become a symbol, not a person with a revoked visa and no country, a symbol." Nari almost laughed. The sound caught in her throat, came out as something between laugh and sob. She boarded when they called her zone. Economy, middle seat, surrounded by strangers. The flight attendant smiled with professional warmth, her makeup perfect. "Welcome aboard. Traveling for business or pleasure?" "Neither. Just traveling." The only true answer. The seat was a window. She'd paid extra for the privilege of watching Korea shrink beneath her, of seeing the end from above. As the plane taxied, she thought about her mother, who'd made this journey in reverse 23 years ago. Leaving Nairobi for Seoul, believing that Korea's economic miracle would provide opportunities Kenya couldn't. Carrying a mixed-race daughter in hope that turned out to be fragile. The plane lifted. That moment of defying gravity, of trust in physics and engineering. Seoul spread below, Han River snaking through the city like a silver thread. Mountains in the distance still dark against the lightening sky. The dense urban sprawl that had never quite made room for someone like her. Nari pressed her hand against the window, said goodbye in English, in Korean, in Swahili. 3 languages for one departure, each carrying different weights of meaning. Somewhere down there, her pop-up space sat empty, probably already leased to someone new with different dreams. The apartment she lived in would house someone new by next week, someone who fit better, someone uncomplicated. The dream of Seoul's first Afro-fusion restaurant would become a cautionary tale or inspiration, depending on who was telling the story and what lesson they needed to learn. But she'd told the truth. She'd chosen her father over convenience. She'd released the documents even knowing what it would cost. And that had to mean something. That had to count. The flight attendant came by with breakfast. Plastic trays and tiny portions. "Where are you headed after Nairobi?" Nari looked out at the clouds, white and endless, hiding the ground, making geography irrelevant. "I'm thinking about London, or maybe Berlin, somewhere that needs a chef who cooks between borders." "That sounds exciting." The attendant's smile was genuine. "It sounds terrifying." Nari smiled back and meant it. But maybe that's the same thing. The plane leveled out above the clouds. Smooth air, steady flight. Nari opened her mother's recipe notebook, ran her fingers over the familiar handwriting, the loops and slants as recognizable as her mother's voice. On the last page, her mother had written something Nari had never noticed before. Hidden in the margin, "Recipes are just suggestions. Make them yours. Make them true." She pulled out a pen, the cheap airline pen from the seat pocket, added her own note beneath in smaller script. "Seoul, December 2025. Sometimes you have to burn the kitchen down to learn what you're really cooking. 8 hours to Nairobi. Then who knew where?" But for the first time in years, Nari felt like she was moving forward rather than sideways. Not toward belonging, but towards something harder and more honest. Toward building a home in herself first, then seeing where it could take root. Toward accepting that she would always be between and learning to call that between space home. "I didn't save my dream, but I saved my name." 6 months later, Berlin. The kitchen was smaller than Nari had imagined when she'd signed the lease. A cramped rectangle in Neukölln where rent was almost affordable, and the neighborhood smelled like doner kebab and possibility, and the particular mixture of cultures that defined modern Berlin. But the walls were hers. The menu was hers. The story being told through food was finally, completely, uncompromisingly hers. She'd named it hyphen, a single word that explained everything and nothing, printed in simple black letters on the window. No country flags, no fusion gimmicks, no explanation beyond the food itself. Just a chalkboard menu that changed daily based on what she found at the Turkish market 2 blocks away, the African grocery run by a Ghanaian woman who remembered her grandmother's recipes, the Korean supermarket in Wedding, where the Ajuma had recognized her from the articles. "You're that chef," the woman had said in Korean, studying Nari's face, "the one who chose her father." "I'm a chef who made a choice," Nari had corrected gently, precisely. "There's a difference. Tonight's service was small, only 16 seats arranged in 2 rows, 2 seatings carefully timed, every plate made to order." Nari moved through prep with the muscle memory of someone who'd been cooking since childhood. Her hands steady as she julienne vegetables into perfect matchsticks and bloomed spices in hot oil until they released their secrets. The evening's menu written in English, German, and Korean: ugali gnocchi with gochugaru brown butter, kimchi braised collard greens that tasted like 3 continents, coconut rice with crispy shallots and sesame oil, mandazi bread, pudding with cardamom cream that made people close their eyes. Her sous chef was a Nigerian woman named Amara, who'd found her through an Instagram post about the restaurant, had shown up with a resume and a story and the kind of determination Nari recognized. "I saw your story," Amara had said during the interview, her eyes bright, "about Korea, about choosing truth. I want to work somewhere that means something." The first guests arrived at 7. A German couple who'd read about hyphen in Ex-Berliner magazine, arriving precisely on time. 2 Korean exchange students who'd followed her journey from Seoul, who ordered in Korean and smiled when she answered in the same language. An elderly Kenyan man who sat alone at the corner table and ordered everything on the menu, his eyes going distant with memory at the first bite of ugali, his hand trembling slightly as he set down his fork. "This tastes like Nairobi," he said in Swahili, his voice cracking. "And Seoul," Nari replied in the same language, the words feeling like home in her mouth. Both. Always both. Between courses, she stepped outside for air, the Berlin night cool against her flushed skin. The street was alive, graffitied buildings glowing under streetlights, the sound of laughter spilling from a bar down the block. Turkish music mixing with German pop, mixing with something African she couldn't quite place. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kip, now settled in a small apartment in Seoul with asylum officially granted, living a life measured in weekly check-ins and restricted movement. Kip had texted, "Saw the Guardian article. They called you the chef who chose conscience over country. Your mother would be proud." Nari replied, "I think she'd just be relieved I'm cooking again." Kip, "That too. Have you thought more about visiting?" "When you're ready." Nari looked at the message, read it twice. She'd been avoiding the question for months, deflecting, changing the subject whenever he brought it up, whether she'd ever return to Korea, even just to visit. The visa revocation was permanent, but tourist visas were different. Possible. But did she want to go back to a place that had rejected her so completely? That had looked at her hyphen and demanded she choose a side? Nari, maybe someday, but not to prove anything, just to eat jjajangmyeon. Kip, fair enough. I love you, Nari Bear. She stared at the words. 3 simple words he'd been saying more often lately, tentatively, like testing ice that had broken before. She still didn't know how to respond. What words could encompass their complicated history? Love felt complicated, tangled up with abandonment and sacrifice, and the messy reality that choosing someone in crisis didn't erase decades of absence. Nari, I know. Talk soon. Back in the kitchen, the second seating was filling up. Amara managing the front with the confidence of someone who understood hospitality as culture. A food blogger who'd flown from London specifically for this meal, notepad out. a group of African diaspora activists who wanted to support her work, who understood symbolism and survival. And in the corner, unexpectedly, Han Soo-jin. Nori froze, her knife suspended mid-chop, carrot forgotten. Soo-jin looked different, hair shorter, face thinner, dressed down in a way that suggested she wasn't here professionally, that this wasn't about content. Their eyes met through the kitchen window. The space between them suddenly charged. Soo-jin's hand lifted in a tentative wave. Nari didn't wave back, didn't move. Amara noticed, following Nari's gaze, reading the tension. Someone you know, someone I used to know. Past tense, important distinction. Want me to ask her to leave? Nari considered it. Imagine the satisfaction. Immediate and hollow. Instead, she plated Soo-jin's order with the same care she gave everyone else. Ugali gnocchi, perfectly bronzed, greens that tasted like Seoul winter and Nairobi sun. Food that told the truth even when people couldn't, that communicated what words failed to capture. After service, Soo-jin waited outside, standing under a streetlight, hands shoved in her pockets. Nari almost walked past her, almost pretended not to see, then stopped. Something made her stop. I know I don't have the right to be here, Soo-jin said in Korean, the words rushing out. No preamble, no small talk. I destroyed your life for a byline. I turned friendship into content. I've been carrying that for 6 months. Good, Nari said, her voice flat. You should carry it. I quit Korean News Daily. The job felt like poison. Everything I wrote tasted like what I did to you, Soo-jin's voice cracked. Real emotion, undeniable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I understand what I took from you. And I'm sorry. Deeply, completely sorry. Nari looked at the woman who'd been her only friend in Seoul, who'd taught her which subway lines ran late, where to buy the best gochugaru, how to navigate a city that looked at mixed-race faces with curiosity and suspicion in equal measure, who'd also packaged that friendship into an article that destroyed everything. Both things were true. Both things mattered. I appreciate the apology, Nari said finally, each word measured. But I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet, maybe not ever. I understand. Soo-jin nodded, accepting. The meal was 140 euros. Pay at the counter. Soo-jin nodded again, turned to go, then paused. Looked back. Your food was extraordinary. That's not flattery. It's the truth. You're doing something here that Seoul never deserved. She left, disappeared into the Berlin night, absorbed by the crowd. Nari stood in the cool air, watching her disappear. Forgiveness felt far away, maybe impossible, probably unwise. But the anger that had consumed her 6 months ago had cooled into something less sharp, less consuming. Not acceptance, but acknowledgement. People failed each other. Love and betrayal coexisted. Stories didn't always resolve cleanly, didn't always end with reconciliation and understanding. Back inside, Amara was closing up, counting the register, wiping down tables. Good service tonight. The Kenyan man left a 200 euro tip and a note. Nari unfolded the paper. The handwriting shaky but deliberate. This food reminded me that home isn't a place. It's a taste, a smell, a memory we carry. Thank you for cooking honestly. Samuel, she pinned it to the wall beside her other notes. Reviews, thank yous, messages from diners who'd found something meaningful in her cooking. A growing collection of evidence that the dream hadn't died in Seoul. It had just changed shape, metamorphosed into something she could actually live with. That night, after the kitchen was clean and Amara had gone home to her own life, Nari sat at the chef's counter and opened her mother's recipe notebook. The pages worn soft from handling, the spine cracking in familiar places. She'd been avoiding the last pages, the ones her mother had written in the hospital during her final weeks. When cancer made her hands shake, but couldn't stop her from documenting the recipes she needed her daughter to remember. Nari, her mother had written in shaky Korean characters that wandered across the page. You will always feel caught between worlds. That's not a curse. It's your inheritance. Cook from that in-between place. Feed people from the borderlands. That's where the truth lives. Nari ran her fingers over the words, feeling the indent of pen on paper, the physical proof of her mother's final wisdom. Her mother had known somehow that belonging wouldn't come from choosing one identity over another. It would come from embracing the hyphen, the space between, the bridge, the constant negotiation, the refusal to be less than whole. She pulled out her phone, opened Instagram. The restaurant's account had grown steadily, 15,000 followers now, most drawn by the articles about her deportation, but staying for the food, for the story being told in ugali and kimchi and cardamom. She composed a post. People ask why I cook the way I do. The answer is simple. I cook from the only place I've ever truly lived, the space between identities, between countries, between the person I was told to be and the person I actually am. Every dish at Hyphen is a conversation between Seoul and Nairobi, tradition and innovation, loss and hope. I didn't choose this in-between existence, but I've learned to call it home. She attached a photo of tonight's ugali gnocchi, golden and imperfect and true, steam rising, the lighting perfect. Posted it without hesitation, watched the likes start accumulating immediately. Hearts from strangers, affirmation from people she'd never meet. A message came through from a food magazine in New York. We'd love to feature you for our Diaspora issue. Can we schedule an interview? Another from a Culinary foundation in Amsterdam. We're offering grants for innovative immigrant chefs. Your work exemplifies what we're looking for. Opportunities blooming from the ashes of her soul dream. Not better or worse, just different. Just hers. Just earned through burning down everything she'd tried to build and starting again with only honesty and stubbornness and the refusal to be less than she was. Nari locked up Hyphen, turned off the lights, set the alarm, stepped into the Berlin night. The city hummed around her, Turkish, Arabic, German, English, a dozen languages mixing on every corner. The particular music of a place built by people who'd come from elsewhere. Carrying their stories in suitcases and spice jars and stubborn hope, refusing to disappear, insisting on being seen. She thought about Kip in Seoul, learning to be a father in a city that would always watch him suspiciously, that had granted him protection but not belonging. About her mother, whose ashes sat in an urn in Nari's small apartment, finally at peace after years of trying to reconcile two countries that never quite fit together. About herself, 29 years old and starting over in a third country, cooking food that insisted she didn't have to choose, that proclaimed her wholeness with every plate. The U-Bahn rumbled beneath her feet. She could feel it through the sidewalk, the pulse of the city. Somewhere, a street musician played saxophone. The melody, neither Korean nor Kenyan, just music, just honest, just beautiful in its refusal to be categorized. Nari smiled, a real smile reaching her eyes. She'd lost her restaurant in Seoul, lost her visa, her investor, her friend. But she'd gained something harder and more valuable, the certainty that she could tell the truth and survive it. That belonging didn't require approval from governments or gatekeepers or people who wanted her to be half of what she was. That she could carry her hyphen with pride instead of apology. She was whole, hyphenated, hybrid, borderland, but whole. Complete in her incompleteness, home in her homelessness. Some recipes are written in loss and still feed the world.